On the morning of January 5th, 2004, while the Lunar New Year was still weeks away, the atmosphere in the Dongshipjia district of Taichung City, Taiwan suddenly became suffocating. Around 8 a.m. in front of a residential apartment building, dozens of police officers, reporters, and curious onlookers crowded around the scene. On the open ground in front of the building lay the motionless body of a young man. The corpse was covered with a white cloth, but blood had pooled and spread across the pavement beneath. The victim was identified as Guo Yang, 23 years old. He had jumped from the 9th floor balcony of the adjacent apartment building, ending his young life. Police immediately cordoned off the area and urgently began investigating the related apartment unit. However, when the apartment door was pushed open, they had no idea that the scene inside would be far more horrifying. Inside the apartment was a bloodbath no one could have anticipated. A total of 4 young people lay motionless on the blood-soaked floor. Police quickly identified the victims. Yao Yiyin, 18 years old, her older sister Yao Shan-yun, 21, Huang Wenxian, 22, and her boyfriend Huang Yongxian, 20. When police arrived at the scene, only Yiyin still showed signs of life, a weak pulse and labored breathing. The other 3 had all stopped breathing. Among them, Shan Yun, the older sister, was the victim who suffered the most brutally. Her entire body was covered with stab wounds and severe injuries. The medical examiner noted a chilling detail. Even hours after death, her skin still showed goosebumps, an extreme biological response to ultimate terror before dying. The perpetrator who had wielded the knife to massacre them was none other than Guo Yang, Yiyin's boyfriend, who had just jumped from the building. In media reports, they used only 4 gentle words, romantic dispute, to describe this brutal case. But what kind of romantic dispute could drive Guo Yang to attack 4 people, and why was the most severely injured victim not his girlfriend Yiyin, but Yiyin's sister Shan Yun? Let's explore this case together with crime documentary files. Guo Yang was born and raised in Nantou County, then moved to Taichung City for high school. After graduation, he didn't continue to university, but chose to work at his uncle's auto repair shop, a place where he would remain for many years. Guo Yang's and Yiyin's families knew each other through a Jeep club. They regularly participated in group outings and often brought their children along. Through these meetings, Guo Yang and Yiyin gradually became close, and their romantic feelings officially blossomed in 2001. At that time, Yiyin was still a high school student, while Guo Yang had already entered the workforce early, experiencing society through his job at the repair shop. Despite the age and circumstance gap, their relationship quickly progressed. After Yiyin was accepted to university, Guo Yang even moved in with the Yao family. Yiyin's parents initially felt that Guo Yang moving in was inappropriate, but seeing their daughter and her boyfriend so attached and loving toward each other, they reluctantly turned a blind eye. In Yiyin's mother's eyes, Guo Yang was a quiet, reserved young man, but precisely because he had too little education and entered society too early, he was quickly influenced by bad habits from the outside world. Guo Yang disliked studying, spending all day hanging around the auto shop with a lazy attitude. His only interest was motorcycle racing, and he frequently associated with shady, disreputable people. What truly worried the Yao family was Guo Yang's unstable temperament and violent tendencies. Whenever he argued with Yiyin, even over trivial matters, Guo Yang would often lose control, taking his anger out on objects, smashing things, and shouting throughout the house. Since they were living together, Yiyin's parents had to intervene multiple times to stop his angry outbursts. But this happened so repeatedly that it gradually exhausted the entire family's patience. Over time, not only did Guo Yang's personality not change, but it increasingly made the Yao family feel unsafe. As time passed, Shan Yun, Yiyin's older sister, along with their parents, grew increasingly hostile toward Guo Yang. They couldn't hide their displeasure in their looks, and occasionally advised Yiyin to end the relationship with him as soon as possible. But the 2 young people, Guo Yang and Yiyin, despite frequently arguing, would quickly make up as if nothing had happened. However, the changing attitude from the Yao family made Guo Yang increasingly feel pressured and excluded. He began to harbor feelings of being looked down upon and seen as unworthy. The climax occurred in 2003, when an argument between the two became so intense that the entire neighborhood could hear their fighting. That time, they even talked about breaking up. The commotion was so loud that Yi Yin's parents had to step in, sternly warning Guo Yang, "If this continues in the future, we will force our daughter to break up with you." Unexpectedly, Guo Yang, who was in the midst of his anger, lost control and blurted out a terrifying statement. "If we break up, I'll kill your entire family." This statement left Yi Yin's parents shocked and stunned, but fearing it would make things worse, they could only patiently try to calm him down. Under Yi Yin's father's gentle words, Guo Yang gradually regained his composure. He opened up about his feelings, saying that since he was over 20 and this was his first love, he treasured it greatly and cared too much. He explained that his earlier words were just spoken in a moment of lost control due to fear of losing this love. Finally, Guo Yang promised Mr. Yao that he would change his temperament, learn self-control, and stop having random outbursts. After this incident, Guo Yang seemed to truly change. He began cutting contact with bad friends and avoiding pointless gatherings. At the repair shop, he worked increasingly diligently and responsibly. Toward Yi Yin, he also became gentler and more attentive, trying his best to make up for past hurts. Guo Yang believed he had used actual actions to prove his sincere love for his girlfriend. He saw this as atonement, a way to preserve the relationship he considered everything. However, Yi Yin was only 19 at the time, and her parents believed their daughter was too immersed in romance, affecting her studies and future prospects. Therefore, they had many private conversations with Yi Yin, advising her to balance her life, focus on her studies, and not let love cloud her judgment. But for a couple deeply in love, such advice was like wind passing through their ears. At that time, the older sister Shan Yun was also in the passionate phase of dating her boyfriend. The Yao parents felt they couldn't accept both daughters becoming too intimate with their boyfriends before marriage. To them, this went against family principles and traditions. In their anger, they decided to kick both sisters out of the house while completely cutting off financial support. From a comfortable life, Yi Yin and Shan Yun suddenly had to face the difficulties of independent living. The two sisters had no choice but to move out and rent a place, beginning a completely new phase of life. Yi Yin, with her timid and dependent personality, found it very difficult to adapt to this sudden change. She confided to classmates that to afford rent, she had to work while studying, making life extremely difficult and stressful. Deep down, she always felt abandoned by her parents and sometimes thought they didn't love her at all. In this situation, Shan Yun and boyfriend Guo Yang became the only emotional support Yi Yin had. But ironically, when she thought she had escaped her family's constraints, Yi Yin stepped into an even greater tragedy. Yi Yin was the youngest daughter in the family, always an obedient child who listened to her parents and sister in everything. Shan Yun was the eldest daughter, naturally cheerful, generous, and very decisive in her work. After moving out with her sister, she was very afraid that her inexperienced sister would be hurt, so she considered caring for her sister her responsibility. From big to small matters, Shan Yun often didn't ask her sister's opinion, but made decisions for Yi Yin herself, thinking this was the best way to protect her. Since leaving their parents' embrace, Shan Yun had almost become the actual guardian, building comprehensive protection around Yi Yin, both as a sister and as a parental substitute. After the two sisters moved out to share rent costs, Shan Yun also invited her close friend Wen Xian to live together, and the three officially began independent life separated from their parents. In this shared rental house, Shan Yun remained the pillar of the family. After moving into the new rental, Guo Yang couldn't live with Yi Yin due to his busy work, only visiting occasionally on weekends. Sometimes when Guo Yang came, he felt like he wasn't welcome. Even Wen Xian, who didn't know him well, seemed to look at him with hostility. Initially, Guo Yang wasn't sure what was happening, but he quickly found the reason. It turned out that from the very first day Guo Yang and Yi Yin started dating, Shan Yun had strongly disliked him. In Shan Yun's eyes, Guo Yang was completely unworthy of her beautiful and well-behaved sister. He had low education, unremarkable appearance, and especially a hot temper that was easily lost. A combination of traits that made Shan Yun firmly believe Yi Yin would never be happy if she continued this relationship. And reality had proven Shan Yun's viewpoint correct. Just 6 months into dating, Guo Yang gradually revealed his old habits: lack of ambition, quick to anger, and returning to his previous unstable state. This made Shan Yun even more determined to get her sister away from this bad boyfriend. For Yi Yin, a young girl at the age of growing up, fragile and easily moved, the determination to break up with her boyfriend wasn't easy. Recognizing that her sister was gradually sinking deeper into a relationship with no future, Shan Yun began serious conversations, advising her with clear reasoning. With your conditions, you could completely find a much better boyfriend. Handsome, considerate, studying at the same school. Dating a thug like Guo Yang will lead nowhere. However, caught between the silent competition between her sister and boyfriend, Yi Yin's attitude was quite ambiguous and indecisive. She knew both people cared about her, and this attention made her feel important, even somewhat self-satisfied. She didn't oppose her sister's interference, but she also didn't follow the advice to break up with Guo Yang. Each time she was asked, Yi Yin would often evade or remain silent, as if delaying the decision could help her maintain both relationships without losing anyone. But this ambiguity couldn't be hidden forever. Guo Yang gradually clearly sensed the attitude Shan Yun held toward him. He noticed that every time they met, Shan Yun would appear cold, not even bothering to hide her contemptuous looks. Guo Yang began to feel that between him and Shan Yun, an invisible tug-of-war was taking place. Not over affection, but over control of Yi Yin. He believed Shan Yun was trying to seize leadership of her sister from him, and the relationship between him and Yi Yin was being seriously affected. According to Guo Yang's account, targeted, deliberate actions from Yi Yin's sister Shan Yun appeared with increasing frequency. In his eyes, everything seemed aimed at him, especially after the incident involving rent money, the key issue that seriously cracked their already fragile relationship. Not long before, Yi Yin faced a financial crisis due to conflicts with her parents and being cut off from support. In her confusion, she turned to Guo Yang, hoping her boyfriend could share the burden of rent. However, Guo Yang, someone who had lived in society and experienced many hardships, thought this was an opportunity to teach his girlfriend the value of money, to help her spend less wastefully and learn independence. Therefore, he didn't agree immediately, wanting to let her face it herself and mature through that experience. But the matter didn't stop there. During a friend gathering, Shan Yun unexpectedly brought up the rent issue, but this time she changed her approach. In front of everyone, she said half-jokingly, "Guo Yang, you frequently stay with my sister, so you're basically a resident here. So for the rent, you should share it with Yi Yin fairly, right?" The seemingly light comment was enough to put Guo Yang in an awkward position. In front of so many people, he couldn't refuse outright, only nodding perfunctorily and saying he would discuss it with Yi Yin. Half a month later, when rent was due, Shan Yun and Yi Yin proactively reminded Guo Yang to keep his promise. Yi Yin, though uncomfortable, was forced to side with her sister, reluctantly bringing up the money issue. But when Guo Yang realized this was no longer casual talk, but people actually demanding money from him, he immediately became angry, especially with Shan Yun. In Guo Yang's mind, sharing rent money was just social courtesy at the gathering, a way to avoid losing face in front of friends. He never expected Shan Yun to take it so seriously. To him, occasionally visiting on weekends, staying only 3 or 4 days each month, couldn't be considered residing, much less a reason to force him to pay rent like an official member. On the opposing side, Shan Yun saw Guo Yang's attitude as irresponsible. In her eyes, he had nodded in agreement in front of everyone. Now he was backing out, no different from not keeping his word. All the already poor impressions of Guo Yang became even worse. The conflict officially entered an irreconcilable stage here. Shan Yun stopped beating around the bush and said directly to Guo Yang's face, "If you don't pay rent, then don't come here anymore." Not stopping there, she demanded he return the apartment key. Guo Yang, still young at the time with an impulsive temperament, felt severely insulted. He had endured too much, suffered enough from being looked down upon by his girlfriend's sister. This time, he decided not to bow his head. Faced with the demand to return the key, he stubbornly refused, seeing it as a way to assert his right to be present in his relationship with Yi Yin. Finally, both sides parted in angry silence, neither willing to yield. In the new environment, Yi Yin was surrounded by Shan Yun's close friends, people who clearly disliked Guo Yang. Every time Guo Yang came to see his girlfriend, the suffocating atmosphere and scrutinizing looks made him extremely uncomfortable. In front of her sister, Yi Yin became even more withdrawn, not daring to speak up for her boyfriend. This feeling made Guo Yang increasingly isolated and pushed to the margins of his own relationship. He began to notice that Yi Yin's attitude was also gradually changing, no longer as warm as before, sometimes becoming cold and distant, making him inevitably worried. Fearing the loss of his girlfriend, Guo Yang became anxious, constantly trying to check and reconfirm Yi Yin's feelings for him. Just seeing Yi Yin chatting with a male classmate at school, whether casually or socially, was enough to make him restless with worry, as if he was about to be replaced. In this mindset, Guo Yang increased his control over his girlfriend, trying to regain his position in the relationship while attempting to win against Shan Yun, whom he saw as his rival in this emotional battle. As for Yi Yin, she fell into a dilemma. Having been accustomed to silently obeying her sister since childhood, she didn't dare speak up against or go against Shan Yun's wishes. But the increasing pressure and demands from Guo Yang also made her begin to feel afraid. Unable to face the situation, Yi Yin once again chose avoidance. She didn't answer directly, didn't definitively say they should break up, and didn't fully side with anyone. Her relationship with Guo Yang therefore lingered on, like a rope being pulled but never breaking, yet no longer having the strength to hold tight. At this point, Yi Yin had no idea that her own ambiguity had inadvertently become a fuse, pushing Guo Yang closer and closer to the edge of madness. At the beginning of 2004, after a long and exhausting day at work, Guo Yang dragged himself back to the apartment. He expected Yi Yin to open the door with a bright smile, but all he received was cold silence. The key in his hand suddenly became useless. The lock had been changed. He knocked on the door and called out names, but no one answered. He later learned that Shan Yun and Wenjian had secretly changed the lock without notice, even taking Yi Yin out with them, as if deliberately creating a blow directly to his self-respect. This feeling for Guo Yang was no different from being kicked out of his own relationship. He felt homeless, with nowhere to return. In that cold night, he had to return to his workplace, sleeping temporarily on a hard chair under dim lights amid the smell of motor oil. But what hurt him most wasn't physical exhaustion, but the feeling of being abandoned by the entire world. Guo Yang's mind at this point was like a guitar string stretched to its limit. Just one light touch would snap it. In the bitter cold night, he sat alone, melancholy and desperate, feeling he had no place left in this world. And what hurt him most was that even Yi Yin, the person he loved most, had abandoned him. On the afternoon of January 4th, carrying the suppressed disappointment from the night he was locked out, Guo Yang went to see Yi Yin for a clear conversation. But instead of a calm dialogue, the two exploded in a fierce argument. Perhaps after too many breakups and reconciliations, Yi Yin had also reached her limit of endurance. This time, she was no longer soft-hearted. With rare decisiveness, Yi Yin firmly spoke the words of separation and affirmed this was her final decision. Afterward, though Guo Yang tried to stay calm and even sought out Yi Yin again to salvage things, hoping for a chance to start over, this time after all the conflicts, hurts, and cracks, Yi Yin showed unusual firmness. And it was precisely this resolute attitude that made Guo Yang realize a bitter truth. Their 3 years of love was now truly over. That same evening, on January 4th, 2004, Guo Yang suffered severe stomach pain and went to the emergency room alone. After x-rays and IV treatment, he lay in the hospital room with both headache and stomach pain, both physically and mentally exhausted. At midnight, in pain and confusion, he called his closest friend. His voice over the phone sounded like a farewell. "I really don't know what to do anymore. I'm in so much pain. No one cares about me. Everyone wants to get rid of me." In the call, lasting over half an hour, Guo Yang spoke continuously, almost rambling without stop. He said he couldn't sleep, that he felt he had lost everything and had nowhere to go. The friend on the other end patiently tried to console him, attempting to help him calm down, saying that romantic matters would pass and not to act foolishly. But by then, Guo Yang's rationality had begun to derail. After hanging up, Guo Yang sat silently in the darkness, letting the cold, early-year wind blow through his clothes. He sat there until dawn, with no one beside him, nowhere to return. Only strong alcohol was the only thing that made him temporarily forget the sadness and hurt eating away at every blood vessel in his body. That night, inside the apartment, Yi Yin along with her sister Shan Yun, friend Wen Xian, and Wen Xian's boyfriend Yang Xian were eating together. Since it was very late, Yang Xian decided to stay the night, and everyone thought it would just be a normal night like any other. Yi Yin slept in the same room as her sister, and for some unknown reason, an indescribable uneasiness rose in her heart. Before going to sleep, she repeatedly checked the room door, making sure it was securely locked, as if vague intuition was warning of something ominous. Around 1 a.m. on January 5th, loud noises rang out. Yi Yin hadn't yet had time to get up to see what was happening when the room door was kicked open. Guo Yang appeared before them, drunk, disheveled hair, reeking of strong alcohol with bloodshot eyes. In his hands were two sharp knives, reflecting flickering light in the dark room. Without a word, without warning, Guo Yang lunged straight at the two sisters and swung his knife hard at Shan Yun, the person he hated most, whom he believed had destroyed all his love, honor, and life. Shan Yun didn't panic. In that life-or-death moment, she raised her hands to block the knife, not to save herself, but to save her sister. In that instant, she quickly threw the phone beside her to her sister and signaled for her to hide the phone well and find an opportunity to call police. Shan Yun quickly fell down. Guo Yang turned and began stabbing Yi Yin. At this point, Yang Xian and Wen Xian, who had been sleeping soundly in the next room, were awakened by the screaming and rushed over to see the situation. They tried to stop Guo Yang, but unexpectedly, Guo Yang turned and chased them with the knife. At this point, Yi Yin's neck was stabbed, and combined with extreme fear, she lost consciousness. Yang Xian and Wen Xian weren't Guo Yang's main targets for revenge. After stabbing the two down, he carried them to the adjacent room. Then he returned to the sisters' room. Since Shan Yun had always obstructed his path to love, she was his main target tonight. Guo Yang didn't kill her directly, but instead subjected her to brutal torture lasting 6 hours. From about 1 a.m. until 7 a.m. the next morning, the final memories of Shan Yun's life were only fear and pain. Later, the medical examiner discovered that although Shan Yun had died long ago, her skin still showed goosebumps that wouldn't go down. This proved that in the final hours of her life, fear and pain had completely paralyzed her nervous system. Shan Yun was considered by Guo Yang as the culprit of all suffering, and she had to endure painful torture. Afterward, Guo Yang carried Shan Yun and Yi Yin into the adjacent room, sitting beside them to admire this bloody masterpiece. He was satisfied looking at Shan Yun, who had been tortured to death, without any pity. As for Yang Xian and Wen Xian in the other room, he thought they also deserved to die. But the feeling of satisfaction after this revenge was quickly replaced by enormous emptiness. In his head, like a spinning lantern, he recalled his miserable life, including past memories with Yi Yin. But now Yi Yin lay on the ground, life or death unclear, her bloody wounds inflicted by his own hands. He knew everything could never go back, that he had committed an unforgivable crime. Thinking of this, Guo Yang found paper and pen and began writing a suicide note. At 7 a.m., Yi Yin woke from unconsciousness to find both hands tied tightly and her mouth sealed with tape. Her sister beside her was dead. In ultimate horror, She dimly heard Wenxian nearby groaning in pain, saying, "So cold." This final cry for help brought disaster and death to Wenxian. Guo Yang heard her voice, discovered she wasn't dead, stepped forward to cover her and Yangxian with a blanket, then without hesitation stabbed both of them once more. Yi Yin was so scared she dared not make a sound. Her strong will to live forced her to secretly retrieve the phone she had hidden on her body earlier, sending a distress message to her father. The message she sent had only 2 words: save life. Around 7:30, receiving their daughter's message, the Yao parents sensed something was wrong and immediately went to the building where Yi Yin lived. Yi Yin's classmate Huang Renwei also received the distress signal and arrived at the apartment first. He rang the doorbell twice before Guo Yang pretended to be calm and opened the door. To Huang Renwei's questions, Guo Yang simply answered, "Yi Yin went to work," then closed the door. Huang Renwei felt something was very wrong. He suddenly remembered Yi Yin had once said her boyfriend liked playing with knives. Sensing danger, he went to the management office to find security for help. Mr. Yao had just arrived at the apartment and met Huang Renwei. Mr. Yao went upstairs and knocked on the door, but no one answered. Finding the door locked from inside, he also went to security for help. Shan Yun's boyfriend also received the distress message and arrived at the building at this time. While everyone was panicking, suddenly violent noise came from the front yard of the apartment. Guo Yang had jumped from the 9th floor balcony and died on the spot. At the crime scene, police discovered a suicide note, believed to have been written by Guo Yang immediately after committing the crime. The scrawled haunting lines revealed something of the twisted mindset and ultimate despair of the killer. "Sorry, Mom and Dad. I couldn't overcome the trial of love. Yi Yin, I love you. I'm sorry, Yi Yin. My personality is like this. Whatever I want, I must have it. If I can't have you, then no one else should hope to have you either. Even if I have to kill you, I don't care." In the letter, Guo Yang called himself an unfilial son, admitting that the 3 years of love between him and Yi Yin had never been recognized by anyone. He wrote that this had worn down his faith, making him cold, callous, and finally unable to face the bloodthirsty person he had become. The letter ended with a sentence that closed an entire twisted life. "I am a contemptible, mediocre person, just like my death, without any value whatsoever." At dawn that day, after committing the massacre, Guo Yang stepped onto the 9th floor balcony, took a long breath of the cold early morning air, then jumped down, ending his life in hatred and despair. Among all the victims who were attacked, only Yi Yin survived. The neck wound was very serious, and she was rushed to emergency care in critical condition, with her life threatened. The psychological shock weighing on her frail body caused her to fall into a coma for some time, making her family extremely worried. However, fortunately, under the devoted care of relatives, Yi Yin finally regained consciousness and gradually recovered. This tragedy with such an enormous price had actually shown signs long before. It's just that no one wanted to look directly at it. Guo Yang wasn't born insane. He was just a boy who never learned how to handle emotions, gradually locking himself into the logic of, if I can't have it, destroy everything. Shan Yun wasn't a sister who liked interfering in others' affairs. She was just trying to protect her sister, but after seeing abnormalities many times, she couldn't completely pull her sister out of that situation. And Yi Yin was just too young, too unable to refuse, and too afraid to face the words, break up. She thought that by delaying indefinitely, things would pass, not knowing that some people, once they determine you can't leave, truly won't allow you to go. So the terrible thing about this tragedy never lay in the bloodshed of that night, but in a relationship that should have ended long ago, but was always ambiguously never cut off. And that is today's case. Thank you for following along, and see you in the next videos.